Your panel has also raised its disapproval on the way ONGC auction happened, and perhaps this is a disapproval that was waiting to happen because, you know, from market participants to experts, everybody had raised questions over it. You've asked for an IRDA probe because LIC's last-minute bailout hasn't really gone down well with you. But this isn't the first time LIC has come to the rescue of the government as far as auction process or stake sale is concerned. Why are you particularly raising the issue now? This has been a really bad practice, if I may call it.
I mean, this is something which stands out like a sore thumb. And when we were looking at the Ministry of Finance's demands for grants, this was one issue which we could not have ignored. So we have come out with our comments and we have said what is it that we have ultimately said. We have said IRDA should look at it. IRDA should look at the decision-making processes within the LIC and how this decision was taken, and what was exactly the decision, and whether the action of the LIC was in consonance with that decision, and when was that decision taken.
Another such issue is GAR, and I think that's a scare that the markets are particularly very worried about, especially the foreign investors. While it has been recommended as a part of your recommendations, the fact is that the government put it into the budget of 2012 without taking the entire DTC into cognizance. So two questions there. A, do you think it's a very good intended legislation, but the government got it wrong by hastening the process and not, creating some kind of awareness around it? Is that something that is ailing that?
Yes, I personally feel that the government should have waited to take into account the recommendations of the standing committee before they introduced the chapter on GAR in the DTC in the finance bill. Because if there is one chapter which is the most controversial,
that is GAR.
It is the GAR, chapter on GAR. And it was advisable for the government to avoid putting it in this finance bill. They should take on board the suggestions which have been made by the standing committee with regard to GAR and incorporate those as amendments, official amendments in the finance bill.
One of the suggestions and one of the biggest scares that foreign investors have is, in fact, one of the biggest demands that they've made to finance ministry in their meeting is that there should be a 3-month window. There should be a sunset clause, there should be a 3-month window. But isn't there a fear then of flight of capital overnight if the government does give financial institutions a 3-month window to become permissible?
I'm not particularly impressed by this suggestion. But my own take on this is that once the recommendations of the standing committee are incorporated in the finance bill, then GAR will not appear to be as...
Could you just expound upon some of the recommendations that will perhaps make it more acceptable?
Yeah, we have said, for instance, that that when the income tax authorities come to the conclusion that somebody is indulging in aggressive tax planning or abusive tax planning, then that matter should be first looked at the moment the GAR provides for a peer review by 3 income tax commissioners. We have said they should raise the level. It should be done by a chief commissioner of income tax, and the panel should include independent
so that foreign investors are not left at the mercy of the tax.
And then we have said that, very importantly, that the burden of proof will still remain with the department and will not shift to the assessee. So it's a department which must prove that there is an element of tax avoidance, and not the assessee. He need not come and prove that he is not in fact indulging aggressive tax planning or in tax avoidance. This is the second. The third very important and wholesome suggestion here, generally across the board, but including GAR, is that the department should keep a vigil on income tax officers who repeatedly pass excessive assessment orders. And anyone who is repeatedly doing this and their assessment orders are being set aside should then be pulled up. The departmental action should be taken against such officers so that officers learn to act more responsibly.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Another issue, sir, that has got India a lot of global slack is the Vodafone retrospective tax issue. This is an amendment that the government has proposed in the finance bill. And Vodafone, of course, has taken the government by its horns. First, the whole arbitration threat and all of that. Do you think Vodafone is justified in this action?
I will not pronounce a judgment on this because the Supreme Court has already pronounced a judgment. I only say that the government, the Parliament of India, has the authority under the Constitution to pass legislation with retrospective effect. That is a right that the Constitution has given to Parliament. It has been done in the past. It was done even by me, but never before has so much hullabaloo been created as in this particular case, and therefore this does need a closer look.
When you say a closer look, do you think the government is not justified in taxing Vodafone despite trying to protect its revenues?
No, as I said earlier, I will not pronounce on this individual.
Yes.
On this individual case. We are talking in general terms about retrospective legislation and the right to make that legislation. There are many countries in the world.
I will not talk to you particularly about this case.
Yeah.
Exactly. When you say many countries, UK has also done it. Despite the fact that UK is championing the cause of Vodafone here in India, UK has brought about a lot of...
But there are other issues in this. Did the Prime Minister write a letter to Gordon Brown?
They say it's put out of context when you ask them this question.
Did he give any assurance? Then Vodafone is the purchaser. The responsibility to deduct, withholding tax.
But they say that Vodafone is a representative assessee. It was always told to withhold tax. What I'm asking you is, let's not get into the specific case because I'm sure you wouldn't want to answer on that. But what I'm asking you is that should one company and should the global slack on account of one company change the mind of policymakers like yourself in Parliament?
No, it should not. It should not. And that's where if you think it's a question of your conviction, you think that you are in the right and you are taking the right step, then you should go ahead and do it. I do believe, I do agree with the Finance Minister when he says that India is not a tax haven. India is not a no-tax country. And everybody who is dealing with India should know this, and people have taken advantage of certain tax treaties in the past. GAR is meant to avoid such situations, and I think India as a country is well within its rights to collect the tax which is its due.
2G recommendations have just come in from TRAI, and when one sees these recommendations, because prices have been so steeply reserved now, one is perhaps prompted to think that it is the CAG report or the Supreme Court's verdict that did allude to maximization of revenues that have been the underlying fact. The government, I'm sure, does not have the wherewithal because, they may not want to be pulled up later to do anything with pricing right now. So as far as the industry is concerned, it's a huge blow for them. It will not just increase their cost of operations, but will also increase charges for consumers like me. Isn't this some kind of isn't it a little unfortunate that it has happened? Because everybody here is now just trying to maximize revenues without taking into cognizance the end result.
From day one, when the telecom policy was liberalized, and I'm talking of 1994 and beyond, the term used has been market-determined spectrum prices. Let the market decide. If a reserve price has been fixed, which is going to raise call charges, then the market is bound to respond adversely. Then it will, the growth of telecom in India will stand reduced to that extent. And ultimately, if we are overpricing the spectrum, then someday we'll have to take a look at it again. The point which I am making, and I will continue to make, is TRAI or no TRAI, Department of Telecom or no Department of Telecom, the government of the day should let the spectrum prices be tested in the market, and whatever is acceptable to the market should be the norm rather than any arbitrary fixing of spectrum prices.
RIL perhaps operates the world's most prolific gas fields, which is KG-D6. Now output from that has plummeted to all-time record low levels. The government threatened some action, hasn't really done anything. RIL has moved arbitration. Besides the fact that this provides feedstock to power and fertilizer companies. This has very important revenue implications for the government. In that sense, don't you think the government should be a little more stringent, a little more strict, perhaps look at penalizing RIL and at least revise that output?
There is a CNAG report on KG Basin also, and they have made certain observations which are not very pleasant.
That's right.
And I do agree with you that there is an agreement. The government should insist that the agreement should be observed, and that not only production but also the revenues that should accrue to government should accrue to government.
I think it's Kaushik Basu who has prompted this question. He has perhaps said what is a really open secret as far as governance is concerned. When you do move closer to the polls, be it any government, it is the populist measures that take over and perhaps reforms take a beating. In that sense, do you think he's perhaps said what is a good, well-kept secret within Parliament?
No, it is not a well-kept secret at all. It's something which was out in the open, in the public domain all the time. The reason why the media latched on to what Kaushik Basu said was because it came from an insider in the government. That's why. If you and I had said it, then it wouldn't have carried exactly the same weight. But Kaushik Basu, I have repeatedly has only spoken the truth. And I'd also say that the 12-13 budget was the last chance for this government to really usher in reforms and take corrective measures, because from now on we are already in the election mode. You know, the presidential elections are coming, the state elections are coming, then 2014 we'll have the general elections. And the government is handicapped to that extent.
But sir, you have won too many elections on your own to know that academicians like Kaushik Basu do not perhaps understand the importance that electorate or a voter has, and it is very important to keep him happy. I mean, we may not like it, it may not be sound economics, but that is the political reality.
Yeah, but I'll only make one point, and that is that if the government of the day is the role of a doctor of medicine, then they have to say that this medicine is bitter, but please take it because it's good for your health. And it becomes their responsibility to take the message to the people. And many of us fail at the hustings because we have not been able to convince the people about the bitterness of the medicine that we are giving to them. But it is very important yet still for the government to administer that bitter medicine.
We would certainly hope that they would do some bit of that, because I'm sure global investors, market participants, India Inc. is perhaps looking at the opposition and the government coming back together. And yes, I buy your point. The onus to walk those two steps really lies on them. Thank you very much for talking to us, sir. It's always a pleasure.